Hello, everyone. Dr. Ames here. This time, I'd like to talk to you about integrated brand promotion in terms of the communication process, but especially in terms of advertising. Now, as you can see here, IBP really includes a lot of tools. And the idea is that these tools will work together. And so, really, what you are doing with IBP is creating marketing campaigns. Now, certainly advertising is at the top of the list here for a very good reason. Advertising, as a category all by itself, has the most tools, and they're also the ones that are the most familiar to us because those are the ones that marketers really began with in the early days of marketing. And as you can see from all of these options here, that many of them are digital and they're very much related to the use of today's technology. So this is not an exclusive list, of course, and there are advertising tools mixed in with all of these other choices. A sales promotion, for example, is certainly not advertising. A sales promotion is something that we're used to. For instance, we'll go into a store, we'll see a product in a signage of some type saying, buy one, get the second one at 50% off. That's a sales promotion. Sometimes they're even packaged to be as a sale promotion. For instance, two items that are the same will be bundled together and in a same piece of packaging and offered for a reduced price. And the retailer will have some sort of signage, or these days you will find it online in that form. It will be offered as so many in the package. Point of purchase, of course, those are the things that we see all around us as we try and check out for many and most retail establishments. So that's where the candy and the snacks and the convenience items are all located at the point of purchase. And certainly, you know from personal experience that that's a powerful place to put something. Um, Direct marketing, of course, is singling you out as an individual or as a member of a targeted group, an audience that the marketing marketer uses, and they will send you a direct marketing piece, very much tailored to you. Quite often, we don't see as much of this as we used to in the past. It would be what in the past people would say, oh, well, my mailbox is full of junk mail. Well, that junk mail is some campaign marketing piece that some marketing individual put a lot of creative hours into to reach you and try and break through your selective perception so that they can persuade you to do something. So, for instance, I will get a AAA magazine several times a year in the mail because I'm a member of the AAA automobile club, you know, with the towing and all of that sort of stuff. And within that will be mainly their ads for all the many services that they provide, discounts and hookups for traveling and vacations and so forth. But also there are many ads from a lot of the businesses who support their operations and so forth and who they have these alliances with that you actually can go and say, I'm a AAA member, can I get 10% off on the hotel room for the night? So direct marketing is still used. It has a low response rate, but today it's extremely targeted. So it can be very effective when done right. Now, personal selling isn't something that we see much of today. Generally, there are a few industries that we can identify with personal selling. For instance, insurance is usually personal selling, but at the same time, we can get insurance all we want individually online. My dog is incredibly bored with this whole topic, but we'll try and work through it here. Um, but personal selling is generally done in business to business commerce, what we call B2B. That's where we really see it. Representatives from different organizations will contact each other. They'll send bids back and forth. They'll say, this is what we've got. We're answering your bid. And you might be the purchaser for an organization and you pick the best bid and so forth. But personal selling's involved. There aren't any marketing campaigns that businesses use to market each other. Now, think about this as well. The business to consumer market, B2C, is absolutely huge. But when we talk about B2B, it's even bigger. And the reason is because large sums of money trade hands between companies, and the orders certainly are larger and so forth. So many are even contractual in nature, or many B2C transactions and so forth are one-time things, and there's no obligation to continue on. But personal selling is at the heart of those relationships. Now we also see a plethora of internet advertising of all types, but there are other things that we can do that are really part of today's IBP package. Event sponsorships are very big, as well as what we call experiential marketing, where you see it fairs and get-togethers like not only county fairs, but also conferences and expos, things like that. And you will see marketers of various types doing personal selling in that setting and doing demonstrations and even allowing you sometimes to try things and so forth in an effort to get their brand in your mind and even persuade you to buy something. Now, what we also see is certainly because we have such a reliance today as part of these IBP campaigns, which include, again, several different promotional and marketing and advertising tools that you put together in a concentrated package to have the same message that is brief, that is rememberable on a certain level, that has some impact that you think in some way, that it's consistent, and it gets a message into the mind of your consumers that you want. When a certain brand or type of goods is mentioned, and your brand is related to that, you want your brand to pop into the mind of the consumer with all those positive attributes that you've been spreading around through your marketing campaigns. And so it does include all of these things here that are modern, really, and digital in nature, the blogs. Um, Many entrepreneurs begin by starting a blog or starting to visit blogs to find out what's going on in this industry and what are people that do this, or what are they talking about. And you can build networks and relationships that will help you get into business. Podcasts, of course. Smartphone messaging is one of the newer tools where you're getting bombarded now with marketing messages to your telephone. And that's because we are mobile and wireless, and we travel around with our locations on, and marketers who have the right software can follow us and so forth. And they certainly know when we visit a website and all of that. But other things mixed into this modern digital frenzy, you might say, are things like outdoor signage. And outdoor signage is not just things like the sign for an individual business, for instance, but also signs that we see in cities that are informational, signs we see in places that are communication and transportation hubs. So we see all types of outdoor signage. Some is static, it never changes, but much of it today is digital, and it constantly is changing and giving you sometimes you can interact and choose by pressing buttons or whatever to get different options. And then we see billboards, which have been around a long time. But if you've been driving around much these days, you'll notice that some billboards are being converted slowly over to the digital type. A huge advantage. There's no longer just one static message that stays up there for months on end, sometimes beyond the event that you're promoting and so forth, as you probably have noticed as you see billboards. Today, billboards that are digital are programmable. So think about that. You could set how long an ad stays up on there. It's brightly colored so you can see it at night like a television screen that's 100 feet, well, 40 feet by 50 feet and so forth. They're quite dramatic. And so if you've seen them, you know how effective they can be. Well, these types of digital bulletin boards are on the sides of buses and on the sides of even trains that or streetcars, we might say, that is slower moving transit. So even aerial advertising is out there, and it is a choice depending on if it's an event or something. You might choose aerial advertising if you could reach several 100,000 people in one go across. Now, what is interesting about all these tools I'm talking about is public relations. This one certainly is not advertising because, as we've talked about, advertising is always paid for, and it's always mass mediated tools. So billboards are advertising, and blogs are really an advertising tool, even though they're digital, because they're mass mediated and you can reach a mass amount of people, even a national amount of people through a blog and so forth. And the same with podcasting. On the other hand, we don't really consider social networks mass mediated in the sense they are. There's a debate there really about it, but it's not necessarily mass mediated because it is targeting you individually. In other words, ads follow you around on your social media, and some of it is out there to reach a mass audience, but a lot of it is targeted at you. And they use the tools of advertising to do it. So you will get a direct print ad online. We're used to seeing print ads everywhere in magazines and in newspapers and so forth, but they're ubiquitous on television and so forth. And they're now on social networks all over the place. So you've certainly seen that. And another tool is using influencer marketing. Now, influencers are generally not celebrities because we're not really talking about celebrity spokespersons here. What we're talking about is influencers in the sense of people who consumers will respect for their knowledge and opinion, and maybe that they are professionals in the field. So, for instance, a physical therapist might be asked to be an influencer for an advertisement that promotes a particular adjustable bed. And they might say that of all the physical therapists we've talked to, many of them are saying this is the way to go. And a physical therapist may come on and say, I recommend this for my clients. That's influencer marketing. And you've probably seen some commercials like that. And then finally, we've got corporate advertising in itself. Corporate advertising is very blatant about it. It is there to push the brand. It's there to push the brand image and the reputation, the name of the corporation. Those are all tied together in one big bundle. So when you see an ad sometimes on television, for instance, that's mass mediated. It's called corporate advertising. So it's paid for. A corporation, an organization of some type puts out an ad saying, here we are, this is what we do. And you're sitting there as an average consumer quite often going, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't understand that business. But you know what? They've made a connection with you when you spend enough time to sit there long enough and ponder about what is it they're talking about. In that sense, they've actually been successful because maybe next time they've run that ad and you happen to be around, you might actually watch it. And so what are they accomplishing in that scenario? They are getting their brand message out there, their brand image. Who are we? You have to start somewhere. And so if people know who you are, that's the best place. Now, here's a great example of IBP in action. Cadillac has the same ad basically on television. The television one won't be static like this. They'll show this car driving in that countryside. But at the same time, in your social media, also, you may see either a video that shows parts of that TV ad, but it may also have a tailored print ad like you see here. So the print ads, an old advertising tool, are still much a part of what we see as the advertising usage in social media. So usually it's either one of those two, it's or both. You'll see a video or you'll see just a print ad. Now, how does all this happen? Well, the marketer uses, of course, a communication process. And it is really a process for mass mediated communication. So this isn't something that really works like when you talk to someone that's face to face. You can exchange information quite easily because you can see all the nonverbal elements, the facial expressions. You can understand and hear the tone better, and you can ask a question back as well, right? Well, in mass mediated communication, you can't do any of those things generally. You have actors and scenarios and so forth. So the components of this are just like regular communication, though. Somebody who wants to send a message, the marketer, who is paid by the client, really produces a marketing message. And so that's the production. It is put together by the sender, creative agency, whoever is hired. The reception of it is the target audience that the sender of the message has chosen to direct that message at. And so those people are really what we look at in marketing as they're our target audience. It starts with a generalized audience. We whittle it down. A generalized audience is very heterogeneous, lots of diverse elements. That we don't get the most efficiency with our advertising and our marketing promotions with that sort of market. So we segment and we narrow that down. And pretty soon we get what we would consider a more homogeneous slice of the market who have similar needs and interests and represent. That's our group who we want to market to. That is our target audience. We've segmented and identified them. Now, the thing is with communication that people don't always get the message that we're trying to send. They don't always understand it. And that's what IBP is trying to accomplish. A way to send a message out to consumers that breaks down our selective perception of not even wanting to maybe hear it in the first place or not understanding what the message is. So IBP campaigns have to have each tool that you use as part of the campaign, each promotional tool, the advertising ones, and then the other ones, and so forth, they have to have the same message. The message has to be consistent, it has to be simple and direct, and it has to be something that is easy to remember and relate to, something that will make a person, an individual, enough of a connection with them to engage and to say next time, or maybe not to say it, but to react next time to a marketing message from that organization. Ah, it reinforces it when you hear that same message in a different venue, but it's really the same thing. So that's really what we call that accommodation and negotiation. In the mind of the consumer, that really determines whether or not our marketing campaign, our IBP promotional campaign, is successful or not. And here it is, everything I've been talking about, the production of the message, the choice of the media that you're going to use. It's going to be mass mediated in some respects or another. You're going to use advertising tools and you're going to use other promotional tools. Everything, and maybe including sales promotions, but it might also be something like sponsoring events and things like that. The person that receives it, that audience, many individuals, it depends on their personal makeup. So here's where consumer behavior comes in. You want to do your messaging so that you give everybody the same message. And then again, it's consistent, rememberable, and so forth. So really, you begin your segmentation by determining in the most broad sense, who is your audience and what is that? Well, it's that specific group of individuals who you really want to send a marketing message to, the ones that you want, as it says here, to receive and interpret that message. So a company hires the marketing agency, and the marketing agency, as their representative, creates a product. And then when they get the go ahead and so forth, they launch the promotion. And it may be phased in with different tools at different times. A couple tools may be operating at the same time. And generally, what we find is that these IBP campaigns have a start point and they have a specific ending point as well. And then you measure things. How did we do? What did we accomplish? And then you look at those results, interpret it, and say, we're ready to do it again, or it's best to wait a short time or a long time and do something else, or improve on what we've done, or this worked, but maybe there's a time interval that we think is best to wait. You have decisions to make after you do your analysis. So your target audience, though, has been narrowed down from that large heterogeneous group of a wide audience to a specific target audience, a more specific group of target consumers you think that you can reach with your message. Now, it's a potential audience, of course, but this is how we do it in marketing. It's still going to be the most important thing that you have to learn how to do is to segment. So here are our most common audience categories. These, again, large heterogeneous groups that contain many, many diverse types, groups of consumers, and you want to narrow it down. So we have broad categories that we can start with. The broadest category of all consumers, or audiences, I should say, is the household consumer. There are just many more of us than there are of any other type. And all of us who buy things in American culture are a member of this group. Now, some of us are a member of this group, and almost all of us who spend any money are members of this group. That makes sense. But some of us are also members of business organizations. In other words, we have jobs. And maybe in our job description, and one of our duties might be that we're the person who procures for that organization. So procurement simply means you're obtaining resources. And so generally that means you're buying something for your company. And it's a standard process that many companies use when they need a certain type of material or a pre-assembled or partly assembled or completely assembled component to use in your own operations. You find out through your investigation today to be online, what are the top companies? And then you put together generally accepted business press practices, top three companies that you determine from your analysis. You write up on your company's bid form that has been developed over time what you need, how much of it, and all the very specific specifications for that product. You send it out to those companies. It used to be strictly mailed. Today, you email it to them. You find out who handles whatever in the certain company you're contacting. You send that to them. And so you wait for the results to come back. You compare. You may contact for further information, but at some point you make a decision and say, we're going to do business, and you place an order with that. Now, those members of business organizations are, because they're household consumers, are watching and integrating into their mindset a lot of mass mediated advertising and communications directed. So they just happen to be in that group that, oh, the next time they need that particular product for their company, if they've seen some mass mediated advertising, they may be inclined to include that organization as one of their potential bids. So this stuff does reach people in a very general way, but narrowing it down to members of business organizations, those who have jobs that buy things for companies, who are also in their real lives household consumers. And we find that the same sort of thing happens with members of a trade channel. Members of a trade channel are those who work as distributors or they're retailers and so forth. Even manufacturers and providers of services are members of trade channels, and sometimes they don't want to deal with the end consumer, this group here, so they hire a marketing agency to create ads for them and so forth. Sometimes they will contact and do their own advertising to let members of business organizations know, hey, we're out here and we can do a distribution or supply chain job for you. Now, professionals are the standard jobs that we talk about, or in this case, are like doctors, attorneys, teachers, law enforcement professionals of all types, and so forth, engineers. And a lot of times, many organizations are created just to provide products for these particular audiences. So already you can see when you go after a group like professionals, that audience category is already segmented. And so there are many different professionals to choose from, like I just listed. But say in my case, I'm a professor in higher ed, and I can narrow it down. Marketers would narrow that down even farther. I'm in the business department. Okay, they may not know any more than that. So, and it definitely bears out that I constantly receive emails from publishers, from members of organizations, all sorts of things asking me to go to conferences and so forth, directed at me as a business professor. So that's exactly how it works. And they will go after athletes and all sorts. Certainly, people who work for the government, particularly in very high powered or prominent, visible agencies, and their employees, many of them are members of, you would consider them like members of business organization. Some of them have a procurement role where they buy things. And so the same sorts of messages reach them through just advertisements and so forth that are directed at you through mass mediated channels and so forth. So what we see is that here's one way of many that we can narrow down our audience. And sometimes it comes down to, well, let's start with a certain region or geography, and then we'll look for a certain group of individuals or target segment in that area. So you do make sort of a choice in the broadest sense of where is your advertising going to go. That is a geographic decision. So when you're on what I've been calling mass mediated channels and so forth, we're talking television and radio, of course, the biggest ones. But then online, who is to say at any given time how many people you are reaching online? So that is certainly in many instances, like in the case of a blog or a podcast, that's mass mediated. Um, but we generally narrow it down to global advertising, which is something that you advertise worldwide, and generally you only make very minor changes in the vision, the visual parts of it, and the message itself. For instance, it would be a standardized product that you would be able to do global advertising. And think about that for a moment. There really aren't very many, because when you advertise a product in another country or another region of the world, um, culture comes into play, different languages, different customs and practices. So there are very few products that transcend that. Now, many, if you would say what is one of the most interactive languages in the world today internationally, it has to be English. It is often the language of diplomacy and so forth around the world. And it happens to be that way. It's generally the number one language, although not always, just depends on who the participants are. Around the world, it's English. So when you think about brands that would not have to change their message or their signage or anything, change their product in a foreign market, what would that be? Well, think about it. Would it be, say, a company like McDonald's? Well, no, it can't be McDonald's because, well, for instance, we know that McDonald's sells different kinds of hamburgers in Germany, for instance. They're completely different. And they sell other things that are not sold in the United States. Or McDonald's in Japan, where the entire menu lacks beef and it's all focused on Asian foods like seaweed and rice dishes of all types and noodles and things, soups and things like that. Um, no, really, what I'm talking about, and the best example of this is Starbucks, a company like them. It's one of the very few that when you see a Starbucks in any country, the signage is always in English. The sizes are always those strange sizes. They've named everything and nothing changes there. So that's global advertising. And generally, that only works with products that are so prevalent, that are so standardized that they work. Another one would probably be Coca-Cola. But even Coca-Cola is a flavor that gets modified for different cultures. And then we would have, okay, international advertising. The difference being here, we're not really talking about a standardized product. This is what really happens. Most products have to be altered in some way for their marketing message to reach the culture and the people and consumers in any given part of the world. National advertising, however, that reaches all geographic areas inside a given country. So that's easy to understand. This is basic stuff. Regional is lesser than the national scale. Regional could be as small as a city or a county, but generally we think of it more as a region. Say, for instance, in Missouri, we wouldn't necessarily say Boone County as a region, but maybe Mid-Mo. That would be more of a region that you might advertise to. And in that sense, you would reach enough people with your mass mediated approach to be successful. And who's included in all this? Well, producers and wholesalers, all of the things that you see here often determine ahead of time in their strategic plan where are they going to concentrate their efforts and so forth. And so we do see companies operating nationally. They also operate regionally. Others operate locally or regionally only. That's why we will find some sorts of restaurants in parts of the country and not in others, and different types of food, of course, and other cultural differences. Um, Let me go back. I think I clicked a little too quickly there. And then, of course, our audience could be very local, very directed. And so that is a very specific trading area. Sometimes it can be a large city, but it could also be a promotion that's happening in a small town as well. Now, sometimes there is what's called cooperative advertising, where the cost of doing some advertisement and so forth is shared between the, say, a retailer wants to do something, and the producer of a product says, well, if you run an ad to sell our product, um, we will pay half the cost after you pay for it, send us the bills, and will reimburse you for 50%. That sort of thing happens all the time. So we do see that once in a while. Okay, folks, that's all I have for you this time. I'll talk to you again soon.